now? All right, some of the other things you'll have to keep in mind, please stay on mute during the two presentations. They're going to be pretty short and quick, but this just makes it easier for everybody to hear. If you do have questions, you can use the chat box. You can put those in there, or when we're done, you can ask your question out loud. Okay, so just try to stay on mute for the presentations. We'll have some interactive parts later. I already told you about having your device logged into kahoot.it for a little bit of a game later. And if you didn't see in the email that I sent yesterday or this morning, you can email me your mailing address, and we do have party favors for today if you're interested. We are going to be doing an ID activity after Cindy and Katie do their talks. During that activity, do not put the answers in the chat until you're told to. That'll just make it more fun for everybody. If you haven't been here before, we do hide a little guy named Ollie in our slides, and he is an octopus. And can anybody that's been here before show the symbol that we do when we see Ollie? Anybody? You got it, Charlie? So when you see Ollie in your slides, just do this. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo fun find. So be looking out. We are going to take the summer off of youth events. This is our last one for a couple of months, but keep tuned in because the next time we come back, we're gonna have some special animal guests, which is gonna be super fun. So definitely keep an eye out. I will also be emailing some super cool, environmentally friendly summer activities for you guys to do in the meantime. And last but not least, I'm gonna have Stephanie launch our poll. So if you can just answer those questions, kind of lets us know where everybody's joining us from. It's fun to see some of you guys come from far, far away. And Stephanie, just let us know when it looks like we've got most of the people finishing the poll. Are you sad that we won't be around for the summer, Eric? Is that why you said no? We will miss you too. All right, have most of you filled it out? Just let us know where you're from. Whenever you're ready, Stephanie, you can share the result.
Yeah, looks pretty close. Okay, so 27% of us are from Whidbey or Camino Island, 45% from the Seattle area. And then we have other, are people saying where else they're from in the chat box. If you typed other, please also let us know in the chat box where you're coming in from today.
I see Squim.
And about 50-50 for people who have been here before and people who are joining us for the first time.
Oh, that's awesome.
And let's see, so the fourth question, how many different ecotypes of orcas do we have in the Salish Sea? 33% say we have 5, 67% say we have 2, and nobody says we only have 1.
Ooh, they're on.
Cindy, do you want to say something about those answers?
Stephanie, you can go ahead and answer that last one if you want to, because we will be touching on that a little bit later.
Okay, so the correct answer is 2. We have 2 different ecotypes here of orcas in the Salish Sea, and you will find out a little bit more about that later on.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
That was great. So I am going to now hand it off to Cindy Hansen, who you already met from the Orca Network, and she's going to talk a little bit about identifying whales.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie. So what I'm going to do is just give all of you a little bit of an overview on whale identification and why we do that. And then we're going to have a special guest talk to us about orca identification. So we can identify individual whales just by looking at them, which is pretty amazing. And one of the questions is why? Why do we want to do that? Why do we want to be able to tell them all apart? Well, it can give us a lot of information. So scientists study whales, and knowing who the individuals are can tell them a lot about those populations of whales that they're studying. So for example, it can tell them where the whales migrate to. If they see a whale in one area and they can identify that same whale somewhere else, then that gives them a little bit of information about migration and where these whales are traveling to. It can tell us how long whales live, because if you can identify an individual when they're a baby and then track them for another 20 years, then we know that they can live that long or even longer. So it gives us a lot of information about that as well. It can tell us how big the population is. So if we can identify all of the individuals in a population, we know exactly how many there are. And it gives us some really good ideas about if the population is doing well or if it isn't doing well. And I know Katie might talk a little bit more about that later. So then the next question is, we know why we want to identify whales, but how do we do that? Well, it's actually not a whole lot different than the way we identify each other. Because you know that humans all look very different, right? So here are pictures of Stephanie and Katie and Tiffany, who you've met, and you can see just by looking at them that they look different from each other. You know, maybe the eye color is different, or the hair is different, or, you know, the shape of the eyes are different. So we can tell each other apart just by looking at each other. And it's really not that different for whales. So here's an example with humpback whales. They look different by looking at their tails. So not really by looking at their faces like we do with people, but humpback whales, when they go down for a deep dive, they stick their tail flukes up a lot. And if you can get a picture of that, you can kind of see how they look different. The patterns of white and black are very different in these three whales, right? So that's how we can tell them all apart. So this is two spot. See if you can see the two spots on his tails. This is one named Caspian here in the middle. This guy doesn't really have a name yet. He just has a number, but hopefully he'll get a name soon. So that's how we tell humpback whales apart. And again, that can give us a lot of really interesting information about these whales. For example, Caspian, we know, comes here to this area in Washington State and British Columbia. He comes here a lot in the summer. And then I just found out this last year that he was seen off of Mexico. So that gave us some information about where he migrates to. And then with gray whales, you can look at the tail flukes on gray whales, just like you do with humpback whales, but you can also look at the back. So they don't actually have a dorsal fin. Those of you who have been in our gray whale youth Zooms in the past probably know this, but they have knuckles or bumps along their back. And if you look at that area, you can see that the patterns are different. They have a lot of spots, but those spots are in different places and different patterns. So if you look at Shackleton and Earhart and Lucifer, can you kind of see how those spots are different and they're different colors? And that's how we can tell them all apart. So that's just a little introduction to identifying whales and how we do that and why we do that. What I'm going to do now is stop sharing so that we can have our special guest join us. So Katie is going to go ahead and introduce Katie, and then she'll talk to you some more.
It's the attack of the Katies today. We are the best, I think. So yeah, Katie Jones is joining us today. She's the Education Outreach Coordinator from the Center for Whale Research on Friday Harbor, Washington. She's also been a naturalist in the San Juan since 2001. She's worked with orcas for many years, and she knows them all as individuals. And she's also, I hear, a wonderful artist and photographer. So Katie, take it away. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys. I'm really excited to be here. You know, photo ID and telling different orcas apart is one of my favorite things because it is really like playing a matching game. It's a lot of fun. So I'm just going to pull up my presentation here. Hold on just a moment. All right. So how to identify individual orcas. And of course, we just learned that there are two different ecotypes of orcas here in the Salish Sea. I'm just going to talk about this in general so you guys get a bit of an idea of what you're looking for. But I do want to start with some history. Because why did orca research begin here, and how did that begin? Well, you know, it's kind of hard to believe because we love orcas so much, but they weren't always the loved animal that they are today. In fact, pre-1960s, people had really negative views of orcas. And, you know, we've come a long way from that time period. And I'm so glad we have, because we know now what wonderful animals they are. Unfortunately, during the 60s and 70s, there were captures of orcas going on here in this area and also in Canada for the aquarium industry, so places like SeaWorld. And you know, that at that time, that's when perceptions of orcas maybe began to change a little bit. People started realizing how intelligent they are and how family-oriented they are. But honestly, during that time, there wasn't really any orca research going on early part of the capture era. And people began to become concerned about how many orcas there were out there because nobody was really studying them. If we capture too many, what is that going to mean for the wild populations? And so very cool that research did begin in Canada in the early 1970s with Dr. Michael Bigg. And I don't know if you guys have heard that name before, but he is generally considered to be the father of killer whale research. Pretty amazing what he was able to do. But he was really the first person to discover how to tell orcas apart. And that's really, really important when trying to figure out how big the populations were. And when he began his study in the 70s, he figured out pretty quickly that there weren't as many orcas out here that people originally thought. And therefore, you know, captures were probably not a very good idea for these populations. And so Ken BALCOMB, who's the senior scientist of the Center for Whale Research, actually began orca survey in 1976 on this side of the border, looking at the southern resident killer whale population primarily. And it's really amazing over the years, with the help of lots of volunteers and staff members, he has 46 years of research under his belt looking at this population, and much of that done by taking photographs of the animals. And it's really amazing that you can tell all the whales apart, and that tells us so much information about the population as a whole. And so I do want to go into a little bit about how you would do this. And as I said, this is probably one of my favorite things to do. It is like kind of playing a matching game. If you have a photo of a whale and you're trying to figure out who it is, there are certain steps you can go through to kind of help you narrow it down. So first things first, you have to decide what side of the whale you're looking at, because believe it or not, they're not symmetrical on both sides of their bodies. They don't look the same on both sides of their body. So a good example of that here is K34. So you can see his left side there and his right side, and it's just a little bit different. So if you've got a photograph of a whale, that's the first thing you need to figure out. Are you looking at the left side or the right side? So that saddle patch, that gray marking on the back of the whale right behind the dorsal fin, is going toward the tail, if that makes sense. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Oh, let's see. For some reason, I'm not able to go to my next slide. So let me get out of my... Sometimes this happens. Let me stop share, and then I will restart it. Hold on just a second, guys. Technical difficulties, it happens. All right. There we go. Okay, can everybody see that okay? All right, sorry about that. Sometimes that happens. So the next thing you need to figure out, once you figured out what side of the whale you're looking at, is how big is your whale? So the big adult males have those super straight, tall dorsal fins that can be up to 4 to 6 feet tall. So they're pretty easy to pick out. And in fact, when you're first learning to ID orcas, a lot of people, that's the easiest whales for them to learn first, are those big adult males, because they're pretty recognizable with those tall fins. And then adult females are going to have shorter fins, somewhere around 2 to 3 feet tall, and their fins are often curved. They hook backwards a little bit. For juveniles, they will also have short dorsal fins. Sometimes this might be a little bit difficult to figure out between females and juveniles. Say if you just have one whale in a picture and you don't have anything to compare size to. So sometimes if that's the case, I might look at the saddle patch on the whale. Sometimes the juveniles, they might have a little bit more of a faint saddle patch. So that might be something you can look for. And then with the calves, the little guys, they have a very, very tiny dorsal fin, of course, next to everybody else. And their saddle patch can also be very faint and hard to see. And then next you want to decide, well, what type of saddle patch does the whale have? Because you actually can get some different kinds. So again, that saddle patch is that gray mark right behind the dorsal fin. And these are just kind of 3 of the different types that you'll see. You'll see closed saddles on the left there that are just kind of a solid gray. And then sometimes you'll get finger saddles, and you'll get varying degrees of fingers. Some of the whales have really big fingers in their saddles, and others are just very small, very slight. And then those open saddles, those are really also helpful when you're just first learning the whales. Those open saddled whales are some of the easiest to learn at first because they are so recognizable. So they tend to have a lot of black in the saddle patch. That's an open saddle. And then another thing that's helpful is looking at the spine of the whale. Some of the whales, that saddle patch will go, the gray will go all the way up to their spine, whereas some of the whales might have a little bit of a black along their spine. So that's something you can pay attention to as well. And then, of course, you want to pay attention to the size and shape of that dorsal fin and if there are any nicks. And sometimes you have to look really closely here. Paying attention to detail is super important. As you can see, some of the whales have really, really tiny nicks, and some of them have big nicks that are very easy to see. Some of them do have very unique dorsal fins that you can pick out pretty easily. That's L82 there on the bottom. And I almost think like someone took the top of her dorsal fin and sort of bent it backwards. That's what it looks like to me anyway. And then you might see a fin that's maybe a little bigger than a female, but not quite the size of an adult male. That might be a sprouter male, and that's a male in his teenage years. So he's growing up and getting that big, tall dorsal fin. So that's something you can watch out for too. And then big thing, I did mention attention to detail. That is super important because there are some lookalikes out there. So it's important to pay close attention to the size and shape of that fin, if there's any scarring or anything like that. As you can see, sometimes people mistake J27 for L87 and vice versa. And you can see how close K22 and L83 look to each other. So yeah, use that sharp eye when you're trying to figure out who you're looking at. All right, guys, I'm going to stop sharing. That gives you a little bit of background into how to do that. And like I said, that's one of my favorite things to play with.
That was awesome. Thanks, Katie.
You bet.
All right, so that's a lot of really good information. I think we're going to go right into our Kahoot game now. And Stephanie will be running the game. So this would be when you would get up kahoot.it, and then you're going to wait for Stephanie's going to screen share when she gets hers ready, and we will give you your pin to join. And if you've played before, you know you get to pick a nickname. There we go. And there's the pin, 444-8856. And we'll wait for our players to join. We highly encourage either your actual name or fun whale puns. Awesome. We've got 3 so far, and 4 and 5. Whoa, here they come. All right, I'm going to let you take it from here, Stephanie.
Okay, thanks, Katie. All right, looks like we are expecting a few more folks to come in. Give you just a couple more minutes to do that. Okay, I think that is everybody. But if you haven't logged in yet and you're trying to, go ahead, because you know it's going to take a few seconds for us to get the whole thing started here.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I got kicked out of my thing, but it said my name was still there.
You know what? Let me see if I can back it up here and we can start over again. So you can go ahead and give it a try. So that means everybody's going to have to enter a PIN again. Sorry about that. There's your new PIN. So also give you a chance to do a different name if you don't like the name that you used last time. Okay. I think there's 2 more folks. Chainsaw, nice. All right. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to start. Okay. Here we go. We're going to start. So our first question is, how do researchers identify individual orcas? Red by asking their names, blue by their mustaches, yellow by looking at the shape of their dorsal fin and saddle patch, or green by the way they breach. Which is it? And the correct answer is, oh, look at that, perfect score for everybody by looking at the shape of their dorsal fin and saddle patch. Nice work. And Neri got their answer in first, so they are leading the pack right now. All right, next question. We have 7 questions, by the way. True or false? Baleen whales are identified using marks on the undersides of their flukes. Is that true or false? All right, everybody's answering so quickly. And the answer is true. Yes, the marks on the underside of the flukes are how we can tell those individual baleen whales apart. There's other ways too, but that's one of the ways that we look at. And let's see. Neri is still in the lead there. Nice work. Question 3. Why is it important to identify individual whales? Red to know how many whales are in a population, blue to track where whales travel and migrate, yellow to know how long a whale lives, or green, all of the above. What do you think? You're all much faster than Kahoot today. And the correct answer is green, all of the above, which means that if you chose any of the other ones, you did choose a correct answer. So good work there. Is Neri's still holding strong there at the top of the chart? I hope I'm saying that right. True or false? Big's killer whales have closed saddle patches. Ooh, I don't know if we actually talked about this, did we? So maybe you have to guess. Is it true or false? The Big's killer whales, the other ecotype that's not the southern residents, do they have closed saddle patches or not? And the answer is true. And most of you knew that. So nice work. Good guessing if you had to guess. We can't beat Neri today. Okay. Question 5. What would you look for in order to recognize a southern resident orca's saddle patch? Would it be red, an open saddle patch? Would it be blue, has a closed saddle patch but travels with others who have an open saddle patch? Yellow, a saddle patch with a finger, or green, all of the above? And the correct answer again was all of the above, which again means if you chose something else, you still got a correct answer. Nice work. Yep, and now Neri, we can see how on fire you are there because it's given you the little fire icon. Next question. By identifying individual whales, we know some of the humpback whales seen in Puget Sound also travel to red Mars, blue Australia, yellow Hawaii, or green New York. All right, no fooling you guys today. It's Hawaii. That's right. Very good. Everybody got that one. Oh, not everybody got that one right, but it's true. There are humpback whales in Australia. It's just that the humpback whales in Australia don't come to Puget Sound. So we would look for them in other places. And Olivia has taken over the lead. How about that? Last question, true or false? Orca poop can be used to identify individual whales. Again, I'm not sure we went over this, but you can take your best guess. And if you remember about Eba the whale dog, if you know about her, maybe this will give you a hint. The answer is true, yes. So good guessing. And let's see what our final results are. So Joelle, nice work coming in third place. In second place is Neri and Olivia. Congratulations on taking first place today. Runners up, Kaylin and Purva. I don't know if that was the whole name or not there, but nice work, everyone. Thank you very much.
Wow, you guys did awesome. Good researchers. So I think that you're all ready to play the ID game. So I'm going to hand it back over to Cindy, but I also wanted to thank Cindy and Katie one more time for those awesome presentations and for teaching us about how to identify whales.
All right. Okay, well, again, great job, everybody, with the Kahoot. Thank you so much, Katie, for doing that presentation and telling us how to identify individual orcas. That was super helpful. I also want to point out, if you can see the background on my screen, that is Katie's beautiful artwork there that she did for us for Orca Month. So she is a wonderful artist. So just wanted to point that out. Okay, everybody ready to play a game? So what we're going to do, the way this is going to work, you should all have your ID guides, hopefully. If you don't have one on your computer or print it out, it's okay, because I put some of those in the slideshow. So we can show you those if you don't have one in front of you, so you can try to figure out what the whale is. So what you want to do is kind of keep in mind everything that Katie told you about how to identify orcas. So look at the size of the dorsal fin. Look at the shape of the dorsal fin. Is there a notch or a cut? Look at the saddle patch. If it's an open saddle patch, it is probably a resident orca. Those are the ones that eat fish. If it's a closed saddle patch, it could be a Biggs or transient orca. They're the ones that eat marine mammals. Or it could be a resident, because residents could be open or closed. I will tell you, just to give you a little hint, all the residents we put in the front and towards the end of the game are going to be the Biggs or the transients, just to make it a little easier for you. So when you're looking at your guide, let me just kind of show you an example of the guide. When you're looking at that, if you see a J, K, or an L, that means it's a resident orca. If you see it's a T, that means it's a transient or Biggs orca. So that's another thing that will help you. So the way that this is going to work is we have 12 orcas. So this one's taking a little longer just to show you how it's going to work, but we'll give you about 20 seconds or so to see if you can figure out who the orca is. Please don't write it in the chat quite yet, because we want to give everybody a chance to take a look at that and see if they can figure it out. So once we get down to about the last 5 or 10 seconds, we'll tell you to go ahead and write it in the chat, but don't hit send yet. Don't hit enter, just write it in there. And then when we tell you, you can go ahead and hit enter, and we'll just kind of have the cascading waterfall of all the answers, and then I'll let you know who it is. Okay, sound good? All right, so I'm just going to give you, we've been talking for a bit here, I'm going to give you maybe 10 seconds to figure out who this whale is. We've been looking at this one for a little bit. And again, if you need the ID guides, if you don't have it in front of you, here you go. So we'll kind of go back and forth a little bit. And I want to give a big thank you and shout out to Tiffany for creating this ID guide for you. She spent a lot of time gathering all these pictures and putting them together. So thank you so much, Tiffany. And thanks also to Jill Hine, who is with us today. A lot of these pictures that I'm showing you came from her. All right, I think we're ready for the first one. Should we go ahead and have you all write it in chat? And then since I can't see the chat, maybe Tiffany or Katie, if you want to let me know when it's time to share the answer.
I think they're all in, and I think they all paid really good attention.
All right, so if you said L72 Racer, great job. How many got that one right?
I think it was everybody.
Yay, good job. All right, so let's move on to the next one. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds on this one. Maybe a little longer if we need it. Take a good look at that whale. And if you don't have the guide, let's go ahead and take a look at the guide really quickly. And remember, some of the questions you're going to ask yourself, is this a male or a female? Is there a notch? What kind of saddle patch is there? Let's take a look at the guide one more time. Remember, there are sometimes those lookalikes like Katie mentioned too. All right, so let's go ahead and have everybody start writing it in the chat, but don't hit enter quite yet.
Well, we had some hit enter already, so.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. All right, go ahead. If you haven't hit enter, go ahead. Okay, are we ready? So if you said L88 wave walker, there you go. Good job. And thanks to Jill for that picture. Okay, here's your next one. So again, look at the shape of that dorsal fin. Look at the shape of the saddle patch. Here's your ID guide. We have a couple possible lookalikes in this one. So you can go ahead and start writing it in the chat, but don't hit enter quite yet. All right, go ahead and hit enter, put it in the chat. How is the chat looking, Katie or Tiffany?
We're kind of torn.
Okay.
We've got some Novas and some Shachi.
Yeah, that's a bit of a tough one because like Katie said, there are some lookalikes, right? They both have fingers. They both have kind of a curved dorsal fin. So that's a kind of a tough one. This one is J19 Shachi. So good job if you got that one right. And good guess if you said Nova because they are very similar. Okay, here's your next one. Take a look at the ID guide if you don't have it in front of you. Remember to look at the size of that dorsal fin too. And ask yourself, is that a male or a female? Anything unique about the saddle patch? And go ahead and write your answer in chat, but don't hit enter yet. All right, go ahead and put it in chat and hit enter.
They're getting good at this.
All right, I knew they would. Okay, so if you said J27 Blackberry, great job.
I think that was everybody.
Yay, good job. Okay, here's your next one. This one might be a little bit harder. Like Katie was saying, sometimes the open saddle patches are easier. This one doesn't quite have an open saddle patch, does she? So here's your guide. So decide if that's a male or a female, and that might help narrow it down a little bit. And then take a look at that saddle patch and see if there's anything unique about it. Is it a complete circle or not? What's the shape? All right, so go ahead and write in chat. And then you can hit enter. And we'll see how we do.
Ooh, this one got them. There's a couple of different guesses. Comet, settles.
Yeah, this was-
L109.
Okay. Yeah, this was a little bit of a harder one, right? Because it's not an open saddle patch. So let's take a look at the guide one more time. And take a look at this, kind of this area right here on the saddle patch. Can you see that? Where there's just like that little tiny piece sticking up right there and a little line. So the answer to this one is subtles. So good job. Yeah, that was kind of a tougher one. We're getting a little bit harder as we go. All right, and this one isn't usually a hard one, but sometimes with the lighting in the picture, or if there's water coming up, it kind of might block it a little bit. So hopefully you'll figure this one out. So here's your guide. Okay, hopefully you've all got it ready in chat and you can go ahead and hit enter. So who is our whale?
Most everybody is saying notch.
Most everybody is correct. Good job. Yeah, so you saw that. Good job. There is a notch right here, which is how this guy got his name. Excellent. Okay, I think this is our last resident orca. This one might be a little bit challenging just because we're not seeing the whole saddle patch, right? We're just seeing a little part of it sticking up out of the water. Take a look at that guide again. Remember to look at the size of that dorsal fin in addition to the shape. All right, and if you have it written in chat, go ahead and hit enter.
Pretty much hands down J38 cookie.
Yes, good job. This is one of my personal favorites. I love this guy. I've known him since he was a tiny baby. So good job. I'm glad you all got him right. All right, so let's move on to some of those transients. So you're going to be looking at the ID guide with the ones that start with T. And again, the difference between the residents and the transients, also known as BIGs, as Katie mentioned, there's a researcher named Michael Big who first figured out how to tell orcas apart. And so these orcas are named after him. And the residents are fish eaters. The BIGs or transient orcas are marine mammal eaters. And some of these guys have a lot of notches and cuts in their fins. So sometimes they can be harder to tell apart because they usually have these closed saddle patches that don't really look very different from each other. But a lot of times the dorsal fins really help us. So there's your guide. All right, and if you have it in chat, go ahead and hit enter, and let's see who this is.
Oh, we've got some different answers.
Okay.
A lot of T46s and T137As.
T46 and T137A. So let's take a look at those. Yeah, so they both have notches, right? They both have 2 notches. So that was a really, really good guess and makes it a little bit harder. But the main thing is look at the size of the dorsal fin, right? So this guy, this is T137A Jack, and this is a male with a really tall dorsal fin. But for those of you who guessed T46, that was a really good guess because of those 2 notches. Okay, here's your next one. So again, ask yourself, is this a male or a female? Are there any notches? Let's take a look at that guide. And if you see a notch, where is the notch? That's the other thing to keep in mind. If they have a cut or notch in their fin, where is it placed? Because a lot of them have notches, but you have to figure out where it is. Okay, so if you have it in chat, go ahead and hit enter.
I think they got this one. Stanley.
Yay. Yes, that is our buddy Stanley. Good job. Okay, here's your next one. I think we just have a few more. So here's the guide if you don't have it open in front of you. Again, look for notches, but look at where they are. And go ahead and put it in chat and hit enter.
They knew this one was T46 wake.
Yay, good job. Yes, that one is T46. Now, before we move on to the next one, I just want to tell you a quick little story about this whale because she's pretty special. If you remember that Katie talked about how there was the capture era when a lot of orcas were captured and taken to aquariums, and that really had an impact on the population. Well, the last capture took place in 1976 here in Puget Sound, and they captured, I think it was 5 orcas. But by that point, people were pretty opposed to capturing orcas. Like Katie mentioned, people were starting to realize just how amazing and intelligent they are. And so a lot of people were really upset about that. And they were speaking out on behalf of the orcas and trying to get the people to let them go and protesting. Well, what ended up happening was the people that had captured them under that pressure did let those orcas go. And T46 Wake was one of those orcas. And she is actually still alive today. So that's what, 46 years later. She's still around. She's a great grandmother. And there are at least 16 orcas from her immediate family, like her children and great grandchildren and grandchildren. So none of those 16 orcas would be alive right now if she hadn't been freed from being captured at that time. So pretty amazing. And it just kind of shows you how important it is sometimes if there's something that you notice that isn't right to really speak up, because you just don't know what kind of an impact that might have even, years later, it might have an impact that you can't even imagine. So pretty cool story about wake. And that was just kind of a sneak preview for you, because Tiffany and I were talking about possibly later on doing a youth event where we tell whale stories. So how many of you would be interested in that? If you think that would be a fun youth event, you can just give us a thumbs up. And then if people would like that, we can go ahead and do a youth event where we tell whale stories. All right, I think we have 2 left. So take a look at this one. And while you're looking at this one, I'll tell just kind of a fun little story. This picture is from our friend Monica Wieland Shields, and she had always wanted to meet this orca and had never had a chance. Like, this orca would always show up in a time when she wasn't able to go out and see him. So she tried for 20 years to see this orca, and so many other people had had a chance. He's kind of a famous one around here, and she never got a chance to see him until just recently. She finally was able to get out on a boat and see this guy. So she was pretty excited. And that's when she took this picture. All right, if you know this one, go ahead and put it in chat and hit enter.
I mean, I think they got it.
Yeah, this one's not too
Everybody
hard. Did you guys all get chainsaw? Yay. Yeah, he's pretty famous out here. Okay, this is the last one. And this one's a little bit of a challenge. It might not look like a challenge at first, but once you figure it out, you'll see why it's a little bit of a challenge. But I think you guys are good enough that you're going to get it. So here's your guide. All right, are we ready to write this one in chat? Go ahead.
T125A is across the board.
Yay, see, you guys are good. The reason that was a challenge was because he's going the other direction in this picture. So you can see on this side, we're seeing his left side, and in this picture, we're seeing the right. But you guys are all so good by now that you figured that out. So excellent, good job. All right. And then I just want to say happy Orca month. So that's one of the reasons we did this particular youth event in June, because June is Orca Action Month in Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. So we want everybody to get out there and celebrate the orcas and teach people about them and learn as much as you can and do what you can to protect them. So happy Orca month, everybody.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad you guys had fun. That was really fun just watching. You guys are all ready to go identify orcas now. Great work.
Yay.
So again,
did you have
thank
fun? Yay. How many people were interested in doing a youth Zoom on whale stories? People like that idea? Yeah. Okay. So we will put one of those together, right, Tiffany? Yay.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And like I said, we won't be back in July, but keep a lookout for our events coming up, because we are going to have some special animal guests. And if you still wanted a party favor, you can still email me through the rest of this week at katie@orcanetwork.org. And you just got to send me your email, or not your email, your mailing address, so I can send that to you. Thanks for playing, everybody. You guys were
Yay.
awesome.
Let's do another big thank you for Katie Jones from the Center for Whale
Yes.
Research for joining us too. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, guys. So fun being here.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great summer.
Yes, enjoy this. Well, hopefully the sun.
Bye.
Enjoy the outdoors, either way.
Do I
Yes.
see Charlie with his hand up? Do you have a question?
Yeah. Charlie, do you have a hand up?
I was wondering if maybe you can make it so that people don't do the chat, because when you're looking at a presentation, it's really distracting the way it pops up on the screen.
It is distracting. I agree. And we haven't quite figured it out, but we will research how to have it on sometimes and not the other times, because we want you guys to be able to ask questions. But yeah, I get it, Charlie.
My old teachers actually found a way to get rid of the chat.
Of course, teachers are onto it. We need to ask some teachers. That's a good point.
Thank you, Charlie.
Charlie, you could close down the chat box so you don't have to see it if you don't want to. It's up at the top.
That's a good suggestion too.
Well, the thing is, even if you close down the chat box, it'll have a tiny box that pops up every time someone chats.
We'll do some research and see if there's a way that people can turn that off on their own computer too, on their own Zoom.
Yeah.
We'll check on that, Charlie.
Okay.
Thank you for suggesting that. We will look into it.
Yeah.
We made our box really small, our little chat box really tiny. So there could probably be a solution somewhere in your admin Zoom box. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea, Charlie. We love it.
And thank you for your help as well.
Yes. And for being here all the time. All right. Well, it was great seeing everybody. I'm going to end the meeting and enjoy your summers.
Bye, everybody.